Get this. Did you know that in the 2020 election, almost 70% of newly naturalized citizens actually voted?
Wow, 70%. That's
Right.
incredible.
It is huge. It really shows how much earning the right to vote means to people. But, and you know there's a but coming, right?
Always a but.
There's this myth going around that immigrants just automatically become votes for one party as soon as they're naturalized. We're going to dig into that today because it's really not that simple. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting you say that because just looking at how voting actually works in the U.S. legally kind of blows that whole claim out of the water.
Right, let's break it down. We're talking about federal elections here, right? The big ones, not local stuff.
Exactly. And when it comes to those federal elections, there's one thing that's non-negotiable. You have to be a U.S. citizen to vote.
No, if I've lived here for X years, but I have a green card.
Nope. None of that flies. It's about citizenship. Period.
And becoming a citizen, that's not exactly like a walk in the park, right?
It is definitely not like renewing your driver's license online, that's for sure. It's a long process.
How long are we talking usually?
Well, it often takes years, sometimes even a whole decade. And it's not just about living here either. You have to be a legal permanent resident, first of all, for at least 5 years.
5 years, okay. So what else?
Well, on top of that, you have to show what the U.S. government calls good moral character, which, let me tell you, they don't take lightly.
So they're looking into your past, how you behave, all of it.
Oh, yeah, the whole 9 yards. Then there's the civics test, which people think is just a formality, but it's really not. You have to know U.S. government and history like the back of your hand, and you have to prove you can read, write, and speak English well enough.
Wow, okay, so it's pretty serious then.
It's intense, and then to really drive it home, you have to stand up in a courtroom, raise your right hand, and swear an oath to the U.S. Constitution. It's a powerful moment.
That's a pretty big deal. It really emphasizes just how significant becoming a U.S. citizen really is. It's a huge life change.
It really is. You're fundamentally changing your allegiance. It's not just a formality, it's a commitment to this country.
Right. Okay, so we've established that to vote in federal elections, you have to be a U.S. citizen. No shortcuts. But what about undocumented immigrants?
Yeah.
There's this idea out there that there's some automatic path to citizenship for them.
That's a really common misconception, and frankly, it's just not true. It's way more complicated than that. You have programs like DACA, which helps people brought here as kids, but that's only temporary protection from deportation and work permits. It's not citizenship. And then there's asylum, but that's for people fleeing persecution, and it's also not an automatic ticket to citizenship.
So even if you qualify for DACA or asylum, that doesn't mean you can just vote in the next election.
Exactly. Those programs can be really important. They give people some legal standing, but it doesn't automatically make you a citizen with voting rights. Even the most ambitious immigration reforms out there, the ones that are suggesting a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, they still all go through that same naturalization process we talked about. It takes years.
So even if those reforms passed, it wouldn't mean millions of new voters overnight. It's a long, difficult process for anyone.
It is. It's about really making that choice to become an American citizen, going through all the steps, proving your commitment. It's not meant to be easy.
So we spent this whole time on this deep dive talking about the process of becoming a citizen in the U.S. And we know it's not quick, it's not easy, and only citizens can vote in federal elections.
Right. It's a really rigorous process.
But we still hear this idea that immigrants are going to, overwhelm the system with votes for one party over another. Why is that idea still around?
Well, honestly, I think it's partly because immigration is such a complex issue, and it's easy for it to get, simplified and used as a political tool, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely a hot button issue.
It is, and unfortunately, it seems like it's often easier to rally people around a simple idea, even if it's not entirely accurate, than it is to have those really nuanced, complicated conversations.
So it's like political strategy, basically.
Kind of, yeah. Immigration can tap into a lot of anxieties. People have economic anxieties, cultural anxieties, and those are powerful emotions that can be really easily exploited for political gain.
Makes sense. So is that all it is, just politics? Or are there, real differences in how people view immigration based on their beliefs?
Oh, definitely. There are absolutely genuine ideological differences at play here. I mean, for some people, immigration is primarily an economic issue.
Like they're worried about jobs or wages or competition for resources.
Exactly. And they might be more likely to support things like stricter border control or limits on immigration because they see it as, protecting their economic interests.
And then on the other side, you have...
On the other side, you have people who approach it from a more humanitarian perspective, right, Thiz? They're thinking about the contributions immigrants make, the value of diversity, and the historical narrative of America as a nation built by immigrants.
So it's like two totally different ways of looking at the same issue.
Right. And those views aren't fixed either. What we believe about immigration today as a society might be totally different 10, 20 years down the line. Things change, people change.
Which makes it even weirder to assume that a group of people, especially a group as diverse as immigrants, would all vote the same way forever. Like, people are allowed to change their mind.
Exactly. I mean, think about how much political parties themselves have shifted their stances on different issues over time. Think about civil rights, women's suffrage, even same-sex marriage. The things that are once considered radical are now mainstream, and vice versa.
It's like a good reminder that things are rarely black and white.
Exactly. And when we buy into those simplistic narratives, we miss out on all the nuance, all the complexity that makes these issues so fascinating and important to grapple with.
For sure. Okay, so we've talked about the legal stuff, the politics.
Yeah.
But I want to bring it back to the human element for a minute. Like, why does all this matter on a deeper level?
Well, it gets to the heart of what it means to be a citizen in a democracy. When we reduce immigrants to just their votes, or potential votes, we're stripping them of their individuality, their humanity. We forget that they have hopes and dreams and struggles just like everyone else. We forget that they contribute to our society in countless ways.
It's dehumanizing. Like seeing someone as just a number on a ballot sheet.
Exactly. And when we do that, I think we really undermine the very ideals that our democracy is built on. This idea that every citizen's voice matters, regardless of their background, their beliefs, how long they've been here.
It's about recognizing that every vote represents a whole story, a whole set of experiences and perspectives. To forget that is to diminish what democracy is really supposed to be about. So we're wrapping up our deep dive here, and we've covered a lot of ground on immigration, citizenship, and voting in the U.S.
Yeah, we really have. It's a much more complicated issue than a lot of people realize.
We've gone over how the legal process actually works, talked about why there are so many misconceptions, and tried to really highlight the human side of all of this.
It's about so much more than just checking boxes on a form. It's about people's lives.
It really is. And it's been really interesting for me to kind of challenge this idea of the immigrant voter as like a single block.
Right.
Because like we talked about, their experiences and their political views are so diverse.
It's almost like saying, oh, everyone who likes to go hiking votes the same way. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Right. It's just reducing people down to one single aspect of who they are, which never tells the whole story.
Exactly. Human beings are complex. Our experiences, our beliefs, they're shaped by so many things. How we grew up, what we do for a living, our personal values. It's never simple.
And to suggest that you can predict someone's politics just because they're an immigrant or because they just became a citizen is not only inaccurate, but it kind of dismisses their individuality, doesn't it?
Completely. It's like assuming anyone who drives a pickup truck must love country music. It's a stereotype, and stereotypes are rarely accurate.
Okay, so we're almost out of time. If you could leave our listener with one thing to take away from all of this, what would it be?
That's tough. I think the biggest thing is to remember that when it comes to complex issues, and immigration is definitely one of those don't fall for easy answers, simple narratives, those are almost always oversimplifications. Question those assumptions you hear, dig a little deeper.
It's like you were saying before, challenge those biases we all have, right? Are we really being open-minded, or are we just looking for information that confirms what we already think?
It's easy to stay in our comfort zones, to surround ourselves with people who agree with us. But it's when we step outside of that, when we actively seek out different perspectives, that's where the real learning, the real growth happens.
So true. Well said. So to our listener out there, as you go about your day, think about this. What other simple claims have you encountered that might benefit from a good dose of skepticism? What assumptions are you carrying that might be worth challenging? Keep asking those questions. You never know where they might lead you. And who knows, you might just uncover some really incredible insights along the way.
That's what it's all about. Curiosity, open-mindedness, and a willingness to keep learning and growing.
I love that. Well, on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.